I'm Diane Reese, and I'm one of the project officers for the Gulf of Mexico Division. This presentation is focused on the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division's 4 Notice of Funding opportunities that were recently released. They are Understanding Water Quality Through Monitoring Activities, Trash-Free Waters, Micro Nanoplastics in the Gulf of Mexico, Fisher-Led Aquatic Trash Prevention and Abatement in Urban and Inland Disadvantaged Communities, and Trash-Free Waters Art and Slogan Competition. From here forward, I will refer to these as NOFOs. The purpose of this presentation is to assist potential applicants to develop the best application they can. This presentation will highlight some important information and provide a strategy for getting started. This presentation should not be used in place of reading or following instructions in a NOFO, as this is not meant to be an all-encompassing presentation and only outlines portions of a NOFO. This presentation will touch on the items listed here: the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division, what to know about the NOFO, eligible locations, getting started, project narrative and tips, developing your budget table, evaluation criteria, submitting your application, selection process, helpful resources, and questions. What is EPA Gulf of Mexico Division? GMD is one of EPA's Great Water Body programs and is focused on the protection and restoration of the health and productivity of the Gulf of Mexico. GMD activities are centered around voluntary, partner-driven projects. All projects must take place in one of the geographic categories identified in the NOFO and within the Gulf of Mexico watershed. The link to GMD's webpage is epa.gov/Gulf of Mexico. On this page, you can find a link to the story map pictured here on this slide and find information on previously funded projects. So what to know about these NOFOs? There are 4 distinct ones. They each have their own funding opportunity number and requirements. This slide shows a snapshot of the different opportunities. For water quality monitoring activities, there is $3.75 million available for 4 to 6 projects. There is $5 million available for 8 to 12 projects for the trash-free water, micro and nanoplastics in the Gulf of Mexico. For the Fisher-Led Aquatic Trash Prevention and Abatement in Urban and Inland Disadvantaged Communities, there's $3.25 million available for 5 projects, 1 in each Gulf state. For the Trash-Free Waters Art and Slogan Competition, $3 million is available for 5 projects, 1 in each Gulf state. Let's talk about eligible locations for each funding opportunity. For understanding water quality through monitoring activities must be in water bodies such as lakes, streams, rivers, estuaries within any of the eligible coastal counties of the 5 Gulf states. For trash-free water, micro nanoplastics in the Gulf of Mexico, project activities must take place in 1 or more of the 5 Gulf states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, and be within the Gulf of Mexico watershed. For the Fisher-Led Aquatic Trash Prevention and Abatement in Urban and Inland Disadvantaged Communities and the Trash-Free Water Art and Slogan Competition, project activities can only take place in 1 of the 5 Gulf states, but it also must be within the Gulf of Mexico watershed. Just to reiterate, water quality monitoring and trash-free water, micro and nanoplastic project activities can be in multiple states, but Fisher-Led Aquatic Trash Prevention and the Art and Slogan Competition activities can only take place in 1 state. So where should you start? First, read the NOFO and ensure your project and your application meet the requirements. The NOFO contains vital information that can improve scoring and quality of the application. There are several items to confirm for your organization prior to starting your application. First, confirm that your organization is even eligible. The list of eligible entities can be found in Section 3A of the NOFO. Also confirm your organization has a current registration with the System for Award Management at SAM.gov, a unique entity identifier, and is registered at grants.gov. This is extremely important since obtaining a UEI could take more than 30 days. Not obtaining these in time is not an allowable reason for a late application to be accepted, so please double check this as soon as possible. Plan your project. When developing your project idea, keep the following in mind. The project must meet the priorities of the funding opportunity for which you apply. The priorities can be found in Section 1B of the NOFO. Any projects that do not will be rejected. Your project must state how it is relevant to the EPA Strategic Plan goals. EPA Strategic Plan linkage information can be found in Section 1C1. As you are planning your project, be sure to consider the potential outputs and outcomes you expect and how those will be identified in your application. After you've worked to develop the project and project details, you are ready to write your project narrative. To approach this, utilize the project narrative format found in Appendix C of the NOFO. This provides a format for the summary information page and the project work plan. We suggest you use this format to ensure you cover everything that will be evaluated in Section 5A. Be sure to review the NOFO for the full project narrative format and any cautionary information. As a side note, beyond the project narrative, there are other forms and documents required, including the budget table shown on the next slide. Please see Section 4B of the NOFO for more information on these items. Tips to keep in mind when writing the project narrative are: use succinct, meaningful sentences. Please do not include unnecessary or irrelevant information not requested in the Contents of Submission section, including the project narrative. Readability. Font should be no smaller than Calibri 11 point, and margins should not be smaller than 1 inch. The project narrative should be a maximum of 12 pages. This includes 1 page for summary information and a project work plan of up to 11 pages. Please note any excess pages will not be reviewed. Maps should be included at the end of the document and will not be counted against the 12-page limit for the project narrative. The project narrative and environmental results section should adequately describe what can be anticipated from the project. Past performance and programmatic capability. This section should describe your organizational knowledge and experience in managing grants and performing similar work. The budget narrative should only include information not easily understandable in the budget table or that requires additional information for a budget category. Examples are listed in Appendix C under the budget narrative, but include description of the roles and responsibilities of personnel, description of what supplies will be used for, description of why the purchase of equipment was preferable to rental, provide contract details such as whether it will be sole sourced or competed and why that choice was made, a description of activities of a subawardee. Describe each item in sufficient detail for EPA to determine cost effectiveness, reasonableness, and allowability of the cost. Cost effectiveness will consider the organizational overhead and direct cost versus anticipated results. Just as a reminder, the budget narrative together with the budget table described on the next slide will be evaluated under the budget evaluation criteria found in Section 5A. So if you have a budget table but no narrative to explain items that are difficult to understand, you may be evaluated less favorably. Let's discuss developing a budget table. On GMD's webpage, there is a link to a recommended budget table template that is pictured on this slide. Utilizing this template in conjunction with the budget narrative will ensure the application has all of the information needed to evaluate the budget proposed for the project. This budget table provides more detail on the cost identified on the SF424A. The budget object class category amounts listed on your SF424A must match the budget object class category totals on your detailed budget table. For more information on developing your budget table, see EPA's Budget Development Guidance at epa.gov//2019-05/2020-applicant-budget-development-guidance.pdf. The requested funding should be in alignment with the anticipated results. meaning an applicant should not request the maximum amount just because the maximum amount is available. There are likely several categories in the budget table that you should include more detailed information for, so they may be evaluated as necessary for the project. Please be sure to include that information in the budget narrative section of the project work plan, or this section may be reviewed less favorably. As a reminder, October 1st, 2024, changes at 2 CFR 200 are effective. Of note, the threshold between an item being a supply versus equipment increases from $5,000 to $10,000, and the de minimis indirect rate increases from 10% to 15%. Evaluation criteria. Now that your project narrative and project budget are complete, look at the evaluation criteria in Section 5A. For each evaluation criterion, compare your project narrative and project budget to the corresponding section. Be sure that there is a response for each identified evaluation criterion, and what you've included in your project narrative and budget is sufficient information to support good evaluation for each. Under the past performance section, if your organization has never received a grant or an assistance agreement, please state that to receive half the points. If you skip or fail to provide any information for any evaluation criterion, you will get a 0 for that section. The table on this slide shows the point value of each evaluation section. I'm going to say this again. It is very important that you read the criteria identified in Section 5A and provide sufficient detail in the narrative and budget for every item to be evaluated. Submitting your application. Refer to Section 4B of the NOFO for detailed instructions for each required document listed on this slide. The required application documents are the SF-424 Application for Federal Assistance, the SF-424A for the budget information. EPA 5700-54 is key contacts for the project. EPA Form 4700-4 is the pre-award compliance review. The project narrative, which includes the summary information page, the work plan, detailed budget narrative and maps, and the budget table, resumes or CVs of principal investigators and critical staff, and the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, if applicable. Letters of support from partners who will support or will be involved in your project are also required. There is an exception on the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. This is only required if you have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate. If you are not requesting indirect cost, or you are requesting the 15% federal de minimis, you will not have to submit this supporting document. So what is the selection process? Applications are due as stated in the NOFO on Tuesday, October 8, 2024. EPA first conducts a threshold eligibility review, which should be completed by October 16, 2024, where each application is evaluated to make sure it's eligible. The threshold eligibility criteria can be found in Section 3D. You will be notified if your project is deemed ineligible. If deemed ineligible, it will not proceed to merit review. EPA merit review committees will then score and rank all eligible applications. This should be completed by the end of November 2024. In early December 2024, EPA will notify those applicants selected for tentative awards. Unsuccessful applicants will also be notified at that time. Selected applicants are expected to submit a full funding package to EPA's GMD office in February 2025, which includes all revisions and modifications. After internal review, it will be submitted to the Regional Grants Office for additional review and final award. Grant awards are expected around May 2025, and then projects may proceed. On this slide, you will find 2 links to additional helpful resources. The first is to GMD's Gulf of Mexico website, epa.gov/Gulf of Mexico, where you can find a link to the Gulf of Mexico 2024 NOFO webpage. On that webpage, you can find links to the NOFOs themselves, the question and answers document, this presentation, a common errors document for assistance in filling out forms, and other helpful links, including assistance in developing a budget. The second link is epa.gov/grants, which is to EPA's grants webpage. This webpage provides additional resources for EPA grant applicants and recipients, including multiple trainings. Thank you for attending this webinar. GMD hopes it will be helpful as you begin planning your project. If you still have questions after listening to this presentation, reading the NOFO, and reviewing both the question and answer and common errors documents, please email us at gmp-rfp@epa.gov. Thank you very much and have a great day.